waiting, did the paperwork, I'm waiting, and I go over to St. Croix. Um, and I went there and it was like this whole like rebirth of like, I literally just had my one-on-one patient care in the hospital, no one rushing me. There was this
Mm,
great environment of camaraderie between all the subspecialists that were there. It's a small island. Everyone knew each other. Talked to each other. We discussed patient care, and I was like, "Oh my God, this is the gem of like what you want medical care to be like." Now, the downside to that is they didn't pay well, but at that time,
mm,
my soul just needed to be revived, and
mm.
I needed that. I needed that type of environment to kind of revive myself. And so I told Global Medical, "Oh, I don't want to go to Guam. I want to stay here."
Awesome. Welcome, Dr. Zunda. I'm excited to dive into our conversation today. Of course, as with many of my guests, I see you on LinkedIn all the time. I see all of your content popping up. And I know that's one hurdle that a lot of physicians have in really kind of going out there, amplifying their voice, creating content, and really putting their message out there and talking about what they're doing outside of the healthcare system. So first thing I want to do is simply congratulate you on really taking that step because I know that there's a lot involved in really, in the process of putting yourself out there. So your content is being seen. And so congratulations and great job. So, Dr. Zonda, before guiding new physicians to trade burnout for freedom and then also get into travel medicine, you actually owned your own independent practice. And through a lot of the conversations, we're talking about physicians who left maybe the hospital or a hospital group to kind of open up their own practice. And that was their way to freedom. But you obviously didn't see it that same way. So, talk to me about what your definition of freedom is and what was it about independent practice that didn't give you that?
For sure. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction.
Of
Thank
course.
you for acknowledging my content because it is a lot of work.
Yes.
But yeah, so I'll start with your first question is, I guess, what is my definition of freedom?
Mhm.
So my definition of freedom is in terms of like practicing in medicine is being able to develop relationships and manage your patients with the knowledge that you've attained from medical school and residency, which also includes, of course, evidence-based medical research. And it also encompasses being able to, in return for offering that service, being able to receive appropriate compensation for those services so that you can therefore live the life for you and your family. So if I have to speak of freedom in a medical practice, that's what I would think of it as. In terms of my personal experience with my own medical practice, yes, there was a lot of freedom in terms of being able to set up the practice the way that I wanted it for my patients. For instance, I wanted it to be beautiful, welcoming, comforting, not just your standard white walls. So there was artwork, there were nice colors, and every patient always commented on what it felt like when they walked in, what it smelled like, that it didn't feel like this routine medical office that you go into that's like a really kind of stale looking environment. So it was freedom to do that, to design the space as I wanted. It was freedom to offer the services, as many as I could that I wanted. For instance, I wanted to offer lab services on site. I wanted to offer x-ray services on site. I wanted to sometimes incorporate like other specialties. So I would sometimes invite other specialists to my practice one day a month to sometimes see patients as well, just to make it more convenient.
Mhm.
So again, you have the freedom in that, right? But on the flip side of that, also, because you're designing your own space, your own practice the way that you wanted, then you're also, how can I say, you are treading on you're going into the lane of how traditional medical establishment want things to be. So in that, you sometimes I sometimes or oftentimes, bumped heads with insurances in terms of like, "Well, if you do the X-ray there, we're not gonna compensate you for that. You need to
Mm,
send the patient out," which is kinda crazy, right? It's like, well, they could have it here. It's it's more convenient for them. They don't have
mhm,
to go to another site or try to worry about transportation there. So those that is one example of some of the hurdles. And for someone who's not had a medical practice, who um, maybe you're not even in medicine, you're just listening to this podcast, in your head you say, "But that doesn't even make sense. Why would you make it more difficult?" But there are a lot of other factors behind the scenes in healthcare that I think more of the general public has been exposed to.
mhm.
So I hope that answered the question in
Yeah,
terms of.
absolutely. Yeah,
Mhm.
and it seems like so in general, even though you're operating your own independent practice, because you are still accepting patients under the insurance model, you still are having to abide by the policies and the procedures of the insurance company, which is not always to the benefit of the actual patient, right? And not as the physician either, really. If you have to send your patients out to get an x-ray, it just becomes an inconvenience and also is taking up more, of your time, your energy, your resources in order to orchestrate outside of the office when in general you want to provide an environment to provide all of the services that your patients could receive in-house. So I can definitely see how even
Mhm.
though you've opened up a practice outside of the traditional healthcare system independently, you're still operating under the same model, which doesn't necessarily solve the problem. What do you think about direct primary care? Is that something that you've considered?
And when you say direct primary care in terms of the patients pay for themselves, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Have you thought
Oh,
about
yeah.
maybe switching before we get into what you're doing now? Did you consider maybe switching the model from an insurance-based model to a cash-based model?
Yeah, and actually, I have that as part of my
Mhm.
practice. So patients have the option, like if they wanted to see me and just say if I wasn't on their insurance panel, they could pay cash. Or
Mhm.
I had a ton of patients who were just cash pay. They didn't have insurance. So they like the fact that, okay, I have this issue, I can go here and pretty much get what I need. So I did have that already.
Mhm.
I didn't call it direct pay, primary care. We just called our patients self pay.
Right. Right.
So I did have that, but here's
Uh-huh.
the thing, Bianca, with that, the patients who had insurance, which were probably the majority of them, they definitely didn't want to if they were already paying some monthly expense to their employer for insurance services, they didn't want to pay an additional fee.
Mhm.
Uh, so if you were out of network, they were just like, "Okay, well, I'm sorry. Can you try to get
Mhm.
on my plan?" The ones that were self-pay, that's definitely helpful. I didn't have enough of those patients, though,
Got it.
to sustain the practice just strictly on that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you had a hybrid model essentially, right?
Yes.
But if the majority of the patients are choosing you based on you being whether or not you're on their insurance plan, you would ultimately, in order to change into a cash pay model, you would have to change the entirety of your practice into a completely new business, right?
Yes.
Which didn't necessarily solve the problem. So I like to have that conversation because we have a lot of conversations about freedom and what that means. And that means that definition is different for everyone, essentially, right? But opening up an independent practice or opening up a business may not give you the freedom that you're actually looking for. So really taking a look at everything that it entails, and really taking the time to figure out what freedom and autonomy means for you is essential through the entire career to calling process. Um, so before you decided to move on, talk to me about a typical workday, running your independent practice. What did that look like and how was that different? Did you always run your own practice or did you work for a group before? Kind of take us back and talk us through your entire journey.
Sure.
Yeah.
So from once I completed medical school and then my 3 years of residency training post medical school, I I knew that I wanted to work for myself, but I also knew that there were gonna be challenges, and there was a huge learning curve to that. So, um and, of course, when you're in medical school, you don't really get any training about starting a medical practice. So, you're kinda just put out there to the
Mhm.
wolves that are waiting for you.
I had a doctor once tell me that in medical school, they actually don't really encourage it. They encourage you to go under, work for a larger change or a group. Was that true for you as well?
Okay, so at the time that I was training, that was the beginning of this transition to these large location chains.
Mhm.
So while I was training, it was still more of like hybrid model where you have your practice, maybe you go to the hospital, you get your own patients. It was
Mhm.
still a little bit of that. I'm not surprised that uh, residents are and fellows are now being directed to work for a larger organization because that's how they want it. That's how they
Mhm.
control you.
Right.
So I'm not surprised. So, but and when I was training, it wasn't. So maybe my generation is probably the last of the of
Mhm.
those that kind of still had a little bit of freedom. So what I decided was, okay, I kind of knew the area that I wanted to move to, and I had some contacts there. So I joined a group for. It was a group that was based out of the hospital. So we did mostly inpatient care. So patients who were admitted to the hospital. I joined that group and I worked for them for a year and a half.
Mhm.
After a year and a half, I knew that, okay, you know what? You've learned a lot. Um, it's time to kind of make your move. And I decided from there to um, start looking at how I wanted to open my own practice. And I had some coworkers, colleagues that I'd met along the way, two other gentlemen, that we decided, okay, let's do a primary care practice together. Be
Mhm.
easier. We just go together, we split the work. Well, we started off with that plan, but it didn't end that way. And eventually I just ended up saying, okay, you know what? The two of them went together and opened a practice, and I just kind of went on my own. So
Mhm.
I hired a consultant, um, and we started from scratch. She helped me find a location, get credential with insurances, helped me, find a contractor because we had this space that had to be built out, meaning that you had to convert it to a medical practice, which is a
Mhm.
whole long process itself. So she helped me with that. Once we were up and going, um, just because your doors are open doesn't mean you're gonna get patients, right? You have to kinda
Mhm.
market the practice, and you build, and it takes time to build. You don't
Mhm.
just build in, like, 6 months. It takes
Mhm.
years to build a patient
Mhm.
following.
Mhm.
So, what I did is, while I was building the practice, the patient base, I hired a physician assistant who, would literally we came up with an agreement. She would work in my office for 1 week, and when she was working, I would literally travel and take a hospital assignment in another area and work as a hospitalist or inpatient service, right? I would
Mhm.
do that, and then I would come back the following week and work in the office, and then vice versa. So we did that. I did that because you have to have a certain amount of income to sustain a practice. And in the
Yes,
beginning.
I'm so happy we're diving into your story because this is good. So essentially, um, through the work that I do, I work with primarily physicians that are looking to move to a cash-based spot model, right? But when you were practicing, essentially, which is the traditional model, essentially you hired a consultant to help you get credentialed under the insurance plan. And then obviously there's the build out and then the entrepreneurship ship piece, and you're still responsible for the patient acquisition process. That's very interesting because one may assume that just because you were credentialed under the insurance company, now you're on your patient insurance plans. And once you open up the doors, then patients come running to you. And that's not necessarily the case in an insurance based model or a cash based model, right? So you're still
Correct.
required to not only run your practice and see your patients, but you're responsible for your sales and marketing, your patient acquisition. And so you needed to find another way to bring revenue in the door. And so you got creative. So how did you find out? Was it a locums opportunity? How did you figure out that, this was going to be the best approach in order to keep your doors open?
Yeah, so I pretty much, knew from that job that I took right
Hmm.
directly out of residency,
Hmm.
just from meeting other physicians as I'm working in different hospitals, I, knew that locums was available and started making some contacts then, just having conversations. And for me, it was just comparing apples to oranges. Like, what was the best use of my time to maximize my revenue, to
Hmm.
maximize the income that I could make? And it was inpatient hospitalist work because you work 12-hour shifts usually. Sometimes they
Hmm.
were a little bit longer, but pretty much you would go work a 12-hour shift, either day shift one week or night shift, and you were paid on an hourly basis. You work 7 days, so 7 times 12 times whatever your hourly compensation was, and when I left after those 7 days, I just signed those patients out to the next doctor, so I didn't have to worry about, again, having this kind of cross coverage. So for me, I chose that because it was more, how can I maximize my time and the
Hmm.
income that I can make in that time? And
Yeah, that makes sense. What were you doing while you were working locums? What were you doing at the practice level to increase your patient panel at the same time?
well, a few things. So I did a lot. I, in the beginning, of course, you have this grand opening, you have all these signs that are out, hey, we're now opening. I had my medical assistants who would, go canvass the neighborhood, the different businesses in the area with our little flyers. Um, I did that. I had newspaper ads at the
Hmm.
time. You could get an ad in like a local kind
And
of.
what year did you open up? What year was this?
So this was actually in, so for 2006,
Six.
2006.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
2006. Okay.
back then, newspapers were still circulating,
Okay.
or the little ads that, some communities, like some retirement communities will have their own little newspaper for their
Hmm.
community, and you could put an ad there. I even had an ad 2006, you can put an ad in the Yellow Pages, like the actual print phone book.
Wow. Okay.
Times have changed quickly and dramatically in this short period of 20 years. But
Hmm.
then there were still the Yellow Pages, so I had an ad there, that would run, and the insurances, let me s how can I say this? They th they can do a lot to send patients your way, but again, for them, it's all about profit. So,
Hmm.
if you don't take the lowest rate from them, they're not gonna shuttle patients to you. They're gonna shuttle them to the person who takes the lowest rate. I'm just being truthful.
Yeah.
Um, so I had a billboard, the billboards that are on the highway? I've
Yeah.
had billboard, which are really pricey. I had that
Yeah.
for a while, and then I decided, you know what? This is a lot more to there's a lot more to this,
Hmm.
and I'm just kinda striking out, without a clear strategy, right?
Yeah, well, you did what many business owners do, right? We're throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks, right? So
Yes.
so you're like, "Okay." So essentially, the insurance company does refer you, but ultimately you have to accept a certain price, right?
Mhm,
And so unless you're accepting the lowest price, then they're going to refer out to different physicians that are going to increase their cost, not necessarily just the physicians. So some of the
uh-huh,
physicians may take the lowest rate, but sometimes that's not sustainable in order to maintain your practice. So even though you were under the insurance plan, you were accepting patients under this insurance plan or those insurance plans, you still had to find other ways to attract patients. So you're saying you did everything in the book pretty much. You put out flyers, you put out a billboard, you did ads in the newspaper, you did senior living facility, like anything that you can think of to attract patients. And essentially, like you mentioned, you said you were striking out. Were any of those strategies effective for you? Is there anyone particularly that you did find, useful? Just so we can kind of understand like the background.
Yeah, what was most useful was, and also it, eventually I hired a marketer.
Uh-huh.
I hired someone who was a little bit more strategic. And so what he would do is go around to local community centers, or he would find like senior centers or anywhere where there was a group of people, churches he would find.
Mhm.
And he would say, "Hey, there's a new primary care doctor in the community. She would like to just come out and just share some information about her practice." So he would set up like little meet and greets for me like that.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
believe it or not, those actually, even though they definitely took more time,
Mhm.
but they were the most successful because patients could
Okay.
see you face to face, they could hear you
Right.
speak, and
Right.
so those
So
are the
that
ones that
face-to-face connection, was the
yes.
most impactful. That's really interesting, I like that. And so was this before digital marketing? Did you not have a lot of social media presence? Was this right before on the
Yeah,
cusp? 'Cause I didn't get
it was
into
on the
social
cusp.
media till, like, 20 yeah. So I didn't get into, like, 2018. So this was before digital marketing and social media. Got it. Okay.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
Okay.
so here I'm actually I've lived the transition. Let me share this
Yes.
quick story with you. There was a patient once. So I had this painting on the wall. It was like an artwork. It was like this metal artwork, just abstract. But it was like a ampersand, the Twitter sign, the
Mhm.
whatever that's just called a hashtag now.
Yeah.
So it was that kind of in this 3D format. And I had it there when I opened the practice. And of course, during that time, Twitter comes on board, right? And so there was a young patient in one day. He's like, "Oh, why do you have Twitter on your wall?" So, that's not Twitter. That was way before Twitter.
Yeah, yeah.
It just goes to show you
Yeah.
how things kind of evolved
Mhm.
through the process. So eventually, I did get digital marketing.
Uh-huh.
Like I did some Google ads. And I put a lot of money into that, and that was helpful. I will say the Google
Okay.
ads when they came on board,
Okay.
but that wasn't until around Google ads when I started using Google ads. I would say it was probably around 2020, maybe like 2013, 14, something like that.
Mhm,
Yeah,
mhm,
is
mhm.
when I
So
started
Google
using.
Ads, connecting personally in person with the community, which is also, that's
Mm-hmm.
fantastic, especially as a neighborhood physician, but
Mm-hmm.
also takes a lot of time and energy. And so
Mm-hmm.
essentially, how long did you run your practice for?
So I had that practice for 11 years. So
Okay.
during all this time, I had the practice for 11 years. So in 2018, after going through, it was just a daily process of, you're
Uh-huh.
seeing your patients. I think you even asked me an earlier questions like, what's your typical day? My
Yeah.
typical day would literally start with, at that time, I would kind of wake up, try to like do a little exercise before I left home, but I would wake up super early. So if the office opened at 9, and I was up, of course, at 6, I would
Mhm.
be in my office by 7:30, and then I would kind of go through labs, go through imaging, go through as many follow up patients if that I had on the schedule just to review their charts. I would pay bills, do payroll. Um, do, like, any follow-up, kinda like emails for the marketers, just
Mhm.
those little things that you're kinda tidying up before you even saw your first patient.
Mhm.
So, it
And
was a
how many
lot.
patients were you seeing a day, do you remember?
So, I remember early on, when I first opened my practice, I would see, like, sometimes 5 patients,
Mhm.
6 patients in a full day, and a lot of that time was just waiting in between, right?
Yeah.
And as we got busier, like 20 patients a day.
Okay.
As we got busier, and again, my model was also it was like primary care and urgent care, so we had walk-ins as well,
Okay.
Um, we integrated some workers' comp, so, because I was on the edge of a residential area and a,
Mhm.
um, occupational,
Mhm.
um or industrial area. So we incorporated that into the practice as well. Again, you have to get creative.
Yeah.
Some employers will call up and say, "Hey, do you guys do this?" And I was like, "No, but let me look into it and let you know. I'll
Right.
get back with you to see if it made sense to add to the repertoire of services that I was offering."
Absolutely. So,
Hmm.
not only are you a physician, you're a true entrepreneur. It's what I call
Yes.
boots on the ground. So it's not like
Yes.
you opened up a practice, it didn't work out, and then you decided to do something new. You dedicated, like you committed to this.
Hmm.
Did you
I
enjoy running your practice more than you did working for a group? Why did you not consider like, ooh, like why did it take 11 years for you to consider to do something else? Were you like really committed to making this work?
Yes, I was very committed to making it work, and I wanted something again, I wanted to offer the patient a different experience. That
Yeah.
was what I envisioned, and I wanted to
Mhm.
be able to respond to the needs of the patients, instead of, like, having to go through 3 years of, you know, authorizations,
Yeah.
just to make one little change in the practice. I wanted that. And so I tried. I really, really tried different things,
Yeah.
But again, you have rising cost for everything, including employees, and decreasing insurance reimbursement. So
Mhm.
that's just the reality of it.
No,
And
that for
so
sure.
and I did not when I started the podcast, I said that I knew I wanted to work for myself. That I've
Yes.
always known.
Got it.
That's
Yep.
just me.
And some
Mhm.
people are just naturally like, we are entrepreneurs and that's just what it is, right? Um, okay. So what was rewarding? Well, you wanted to give patients, you said you envisioned an opportunity to give patients the experience that they really deserved, right? And that's
Yes.
essentially, I'm assuming, what was fulfilling about owning your own practice, right? On top of the autonomy, but it is a lot of work, right? So that's just kind of what you sign up for. Like, you're running your own practice, you have to get creative, you have to go attract your own patients, your own clients, or whatever, in whatever endeavor you're pursuing. But essentially, you do have to keep, in order to keep the doors open, you do have to bring revenue in. So what year did you start going out and taking on locums assignments?
So the way that I did it is so early on, you remember when I first opened the practice and I hired the PA. So
Mhm.
I I did that. I did that probably for the first like 4 to 5 years of the practice. Now,
Mhm.
towards the end of those first 5 years, I was able to back off a little bit, right? But again, I knew I had employees to pay. I had a lease to pay. I did that. So then I completely backed off when the practice got a little bit busier, and I just was able to dedicate, my Monday through Saturday to the office.
Mhm.
Um, and I did that for a few years, right? As the practice is still going, growing. It did grow a little bit, and then it hit another snag. Um, and then in 2018, so I kind of knew I think 2016 was, like, really the peak of the business where things were, like, as good
Mhm.
as they ever were.
Mhm. Mhm.
2017 things started to dwindle a little bit. But again, just keep being creative, knowing
Mhm.
that this is what it takes to build this, right?
Mhm.
But I kinda towards the end of 2017, I knew, "Okay, you know what? I think I better really start thinking about transitioning out of this, selling this,
Mhm.
whatever." And I had conversations with other female physicians in the community. We actually even tried to do a multi-specialty clinic together where
Mhm.
we all came from our different specialties and we were going to do this multi-specialty clinic.
Mhm.
So we tried that, but again, there was issues with some of the funding, etc.
Yeah.
Didn't go, so that kind of fell through. And eventually in 2018, I just made the decision. I knew in my heart what I needed to do. And I was like,
Mhm.
you know what? I just gotta like do it. And I had
Yeah.
a talk with my staff and then I decided, I'm gonna have to shut this down. It was hard. It
Mhm.
was gut wrenching for me, and my bookkeeper told me she would come and do the books every month and she
Mhm.
was like, she's like, it's a business. She's like,
Mhm.
it's a business, it's not a baby. You
Mhm.
gotta cut the umbilical cord.
It's a business, it's not a baby. That's very
Yeah.
interesting. And I know that the process of really coming to that decision is probably, a lot of thought went into it and you've done everything you can to really figure out how to continue this. But I really truly believe like sometimes, businesses can serve for a season
Mhm.
and, there are indicators where it is time to evolve. And I truly believe that you, as the business owner, is the only one that really, truly knows when it's time to make that move. Is there any part of you that felt like a failure at all? Because I know that that's a lot of rhetoric that may come up in the internal dialogue.
Yes, for sure. I did, especially, like, around when I like, 2017, when I was really kinda contemplating it, I would pray, I'm like, "If this is for me, things will change. If it's not
Mhm.
for me, things won't change."
Yeah.
And God was answering my prayers. He
Yeah.
was like, "It's not for you. This is not for you."
Well, and it's so interesting, and I bring that question up because obviously we know it wasn't a failure. You had a concept in mind, right? And you had
Yes.
a vision not only for yourself as an entrepreneur, but for the patients that you wanted to serve. And you said from that very moment where you hired your consultant and you started looking for locations and you had to build out the practice from scratch. And you talked about even going, the design and what you wanted to offer and like seeing that growth over a decade of serving that your patients, that is successful. Like a lot of people right now today are sitting on an idea they've had for 10 years and they've never brought it to life. You had a vision and you went out there and manifested and you served patients in such a special way and you gave it your all. And just because it's time to evolve doesn't necessarily mean that that's a failure. It's not. You had a over decade of success of being an independent, practice owner, which, some people can only dream of. And so I know through your work now, you understand, this was part of the assignment, but I want to just speak life into anyone who feels like it is time to evolve, but but have a connection to feeling as though something is a failure when it's not. Yeah.
Absolutely, Bianca. You hit it right on the head of the nail. It's so true. When you're in it, it feels gut-wrenching. It feels like you're a failure. But let me tell you what really kinda propelled me. Because I was still like, even when I knew it was time to change, I was still trying to hold on, like, a little bit, a little bit. But the finances were just getting really, really bad, and I was like, "Okay, enough.
How did you feel when you
Enough."
finally made the decision? Like, do you remember, like, you just like when you finally let go, how did you feel?
I felt a weight off my shoulder. And let me tell you what it was. It wasn't, I knew I needed to close the practice or sell the practice. What it was that I had all these dedicated employees that were with me for years. That for me was the hardest part, was telling them. I
Mm,
kind of came to the conclusion that, okay, this is what I know I need to do. It was telling them. And one day I just set them down and they kind of knew that, okay, things are not looking as good. Um, And they would ask questions, and I'm like, "No, we're just gonna keep, plowing through." But
mhm,
finally, I said, "Okay, you know what? I'm gonna have to make some changes. I'm not quite sure yet. I'll let you know." I sat them down. I said, "Okay, this is my decision."
mhm,
And they knew, and of
mhm,
course they were crying because they had put just as much energy into the practice as I did, showing
mhm,
up every day, greeting patients, answering phones, etc. And the moment that I told them, and then they were okay, and basically I just said, "Just stay with me until the end. I'll pay you all of your servant's pay, your vacation that's not been used, you know, whatever's due for your health savings account that
mhm,
hasn't been, added.
mhm,
You will get all of that. I'm not gonna, like, just abandon you. You'll get
right,
all of that, but I need you to stay until the end." And
mhm,
they were willing to stay until the end, and in that moment it was like my body felt 50 pounds lighter.
mm.
Yeah,
After you had the conversation, it's not
after I had the
necessarily for you, right?
conversation.
It's having
Yeah.
how was the conversation with with your patients?
So with my patients, they were disappointed, but they also understood. They were like, "But, I definitely understand it takes a lot for this." And what they
Mhm,
asked me was just, "Who you know, wherever you go, if you reopen, please,
mhm,
let us know." And they just said, "But can you recommend or refer us to someone who is just as thorough
mhm,
and open as you are?"
mhm,
That's what they
mhm,
wanted. So I did that for them, and they were
mhm,
a little sad, but they were also okay.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. Because obviously
Mhm.
you're in this line of work to really serve your patients, but sometimes we forget about the family dynamic that you form with
Yes.
your actual team members that you see every single day that are supporting this mission and keeping it alive, right?
Yeah.
And we really don't talk about those conversations a lot, and I'm sure that that was kind of weighing heavy on you. So I can imagine, really sitting down and practicing transparency with them and letting them know what the future holds. That is also important as well because some employers, as we know, especially with the larger
Mm.
organizations, you don't get the privilege of sitting down and having that transparent conversation. Based on that conversation, you're being let go today. So,
Yes.
the fact that someone's like, "Listen, I value you as an employee and the work and the dedication that you give into this practice, and I wanna make sure that we make it right all the way to the end." When you have those
Mhm.
transparent conversations with your
Well,
employees, they are willing to stick it out to the end, and they're gonna remember that for the rest of their lives. Do you know what your employees are doing now?
yeah, so one of them, she went on to another primary care practice, and she's doing well there, you
Yeah.
know? She had her 2 children, she just had a baby around the time that, I was kinda transitioning out, but she's doing
Mhm,
well there. So that's the
mhm.
last that I've kind of heard of her, but she's doing well at that practice. The physician assistant I was working with um, went on to do some other things with other practices as well. So we're still in
Mhm.
contact,
Yeah.
we're still in contact.
So, and I bring that up to say, so you see how it's beautiful. Evolution is beautiful. Everybody will evolve and be
Yeah.
okay. So, the most important thing is to finally make that decision and get that weight off your shoulders. Perfect.
Yes.
So, thank you for sharing that journey. I'm so happy that we kind of went back because I don't want to make it seem like, oh, you woke up one day and decided to start traveling as a
Uh-uh.
physician. Like, you did all the things. Like, you did,
Yes.
not only did you work for a group, you did went out and you sought freedom out for yourself and you build up a practice from scratch.
Hmm.
And so you that season served a critical purpose in your life. And I'm sure that it comes in handy in what you're doing now too, leveraging that experience. So know that when you are on this path, everything that we do is for a purpose. And those are things that when you feel as though you're starting over, you're not. You're going to be leveraging a lot of the things that you've all in the experience that you have from your past to help you continue to prosper forward. So, let's talk about what you're doing now. So, dive into it. So, now you finally decided to let go. Did you hop into travel medicine? Did you take a break? Like, talk to us about the actual transition.
Yeah. So as with building a practice, it costs money to start a practice. When you're closing or selling, it costs money to do that too, because you have to literally reverse engineer everything
Wow.
that
Okay,
that
talk to us about that because I didn't really think about that process. Yeah.
yeah. So for instance, you have to notify all of your insurances that you are no longer going to be offering these services. You have to give them 90-day notice.
Mhm.
You have to all the vendors that you're working with, you have to give them notice as well. All the lab companies, you have to give them notice. If you're using an electronic medical record system and you're not taking that, it's not going to go with you to your next job. You have to literally offer. I literally had to
You had to
pay
buy 'em
for
out?
my. I had to buy them out. I had to
Yeah.
pay for my charts. I'm like, well, I created them. They're like, well, you can. They're free if you want to print them one by one.
Mm.
But if you want a copy for your record so that you can have for future use when patients contact you, then you have to basically like, buy yourself. So I had to do
Mhm.
that. I had X-ray equipment that in there that wasn't going to be part of the kind of sale to the new person that was taking
Mhm.
over that space. So I had to professionally get that deinstalled. So you have to hire someone who knows how to deinstall that and
Mhm.
all this kind of stuff. So it's a process, it's not like you just
Mhm.
close the door one day and you're closed. So I had to do all of that.
Mhm.
And when all of that was done, what I did, so it took me, deciding on what to do with what I did was I sold most of I had 6 months remaining on the lease. What I did was the owner of the building wanted to who was kinda take the people that were taking over, so to speak, we worked out a deal basically where
Mhm. Mhm.
I kinda sold them. most of the other than the computers, most of the, office equipment.
Mhm.
I sold it to them, and then I basically just, was, like, in this kinda how can I say it? This space, this void. It was like a void, and I
Mhm.
needed the time to just be. And I just took
Mhm.
a couple months off. I had a colleague who has a primary care practice who basically said, "Hey, I need help. Can you come down? I know you don't want to jump right in, but can you
Mhm.
come and like help me out one day a week?" So I would do that like on Fridays for half a day,
Mhm.
just to
Mhm.
help her out, but nothing. But in that moment though of that void, I was just trying to figure out, okay, now is the time that now you can do what you really wanna do.
Mhm. Mhm.
I was more so at that moment when I started that practice, my dream for that practice was to start it, to grow it, and then to scale it. I wanted
Mhm.
to have one of those, one of what I was creating, kinda
Mhm.
like all over the place, but it didn't work
Mhm.
out. So, I said, "What do you really wanna do?" And in the quietness of all of that, it's like, "You know what? I'm always traveling. Maybe I should use this time to just go work abroad." And I contacted a company. The plan was for me to go to Guam, which
Mhm.
is U.S. territory in the Pacific Ocean. They needed help with their inpatient hospital service.
Mhm.
So my plan was to go there and work for a year. Now, in the process of that, though, it takes a little bit of time for the paperwork and all the different things that you have to do.
Mhm.
So the company I was working with said, okay, you know what? So we can probably get everything in line for you in about 4 to 5 months. But in the interim, there's an opportunity that's closer that you may be interested in, and it's in the
Mhm.
Caribbean. It's in the U.S.
Hmm.
Virgin Islands. Would you be interested in going over and checking it out? Sure. I go over to, I was actually between St. Thomas and
Now, was this a
St.
locum
Croix.
company or is it another type of
Yes,
organization?
this
Okay,
is a
okay, okay.
locums
Got
company,
it.
and it's called Global Medical.
Global
And
medical. Okay.
so, yes, so Global Medical provided a lot of staffing they provide a lot of staffing to these U.S. territories. So
Mhm.
I said, okay, yeah, I'm waiting, did the paperwork, I'm waiting, and I go over to St. Croix. Um, and I went there, and it was like this whole like rebirth of like, I literally just had my one-on-one patient care in the hospital, no one rushing me. There was this
Mm.
great environment of camaraderie between all the subspecialists that were there. It's a small island. Everyone knew each other. Everyone talked to each other. We discussed patient care, and I was like, "Oh my God, this is a gem of like what you want medical care to be like." Now, the downside to that is they didn't pay well, but at that
Mhm.
time, my soul just needed to be revived, and
Mm.
I needed that. I needed that type of environment to kind of revive myself. And so I told Global Medical, "Oh, I don't want to go to Guam. I want to stay here."
Yeah, interesting. So, well,
Yeah,
first and foremost, I know we hear a little background noise. Do we have a furry friend in the
we
background?
do. I'm
Okay, it's
sorry.
okay. I don't want to ignore it. I just want everybody to know. Sorry about
Yes,
that. I'm gonna do the
sorry
best
about
I
that.
can. But we have a furry friend, so sorry
We
about
have a
that. But
furry friend.
no
Yes.
worries. We understand. I'm an animal lover, so we understand. Okay. So what's really interesting is you were already taking on locum contracts in the U.S., right?
Uh-huh.
And then you said that but when you went over to the Virgin Islands temporarily, it was like a breath of fresh air. So
Yes.
what you just described, like, as someone like as not a physician outside of outside of the clinical space, I would
Uh-huh.
assume isn't that what physician care is supposed to be? It sounds normal, like you went to see your patients one-on-one, you talk with your colleagues about patient care, everybody was friendly and inviting. You mean to tell me like that's not how that's not the environment in the healthcare system? Like, I don't understand. What to talk to us about the difference.
Oh no. In most environments, it's not. No, I would say most. I'm not going to say all.
Mhm.
Not all, but most, the majority, no. Now, healthcare is all about numbers. It's all about the number of patients you see to maximize revenue. So you're given a panel of patients that every physician knows that you cannot do a good job a
Mhm.
thorough enough job with seeing these many patients in this amount of time because it takes time. We're
Mhm.
humans. We are not robots, and patients are human. They're not like just some, I don't know what they think they are. But
Yeah.
so here, let me just say, mainland US, the model is you see a certain amount of patients, and some CFO decides on what that number of patients is because they have to make so much money in order to pay whatever salary they've agreed upon for you. And if you see 12 patients versus 20 patients, and that doesn't cut it, you know?
Mhm.
So, and again, in this 12-hour shift that you're trying to manage these patients, speak to family, speak to consultants because you're ordering tests, right? Those tests have to be followed up on. You have to contact the correct, appropriate consultant. Discuss the case with the consultant. Okay, yeah, this is what we're going to do. Go back to the family to say, okay, this is what's now recommended. Are you in agreement? There are all these moving wheels that go with taking care of patients. Again, I don't mind that, but
Mhm.
you have to know how many interactions like that you can have in a day before it's no longer helpful or
Yeah.
it's a harm to the patient. So it's completely different. So that's the US model. You're just rush,
Uh-huh.
rush, 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 hurry, hurry,
Right.
hurry, hurry, go, 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 go. And patients, they don't like it. They hate it
Mhm.
too because
Mhm.
okay, I didn't answer all my questions. I didn't get a chance to ask my questions. Well, even though that doctor probably would love to answer every one of your questions, unfortunately, they have to move on to the next room because they have to be able to have this note, see you enter a note into the EMR system. So the biller who's sitting in another remote office or at home, waiting for you to finish your note so she can submit the bill for the day. It's like all
Mhm.
these, it's craziness, right?
Mhm.
That is what it is in most systems today. Now, most
Mhm.
systems. But there in the US Virgin Islands, on the island of St. Croix, I was able to literally get a reasonable list of patients, like a census.
Yeah.
Sometimes busier, sometimes not, but I could go through each patient, talk to them. The patients were very warm. They were very grateful. The specialist, the same thing, even when I would bring up like potentially new options that maybe they had not had that option there on the island before. I was like, you know what, you can check this. This is what,
Mhm.
we're doing now. Oh, great idea. Let's call the lab and see if we can do it.
Mhm. Mhm.
They were always open, and I could then see all my patients, talk with them, the families, the consultants, go back to an office, do my notes at my leisure. Of course, I would finish them by the end of the day, but
Mhm.
it was just a return to like more normal patient care.
Mm.
You know?
How you would envision it to be in the first place, right?
Yeah.
And, so that is refreshing. Did
Mhm.
so essentially you were working independently under so what is that framework called? Kinda talk to us about how you were working, with Global
Yeah.
Medical.
So Global Medical is a local locum tenens company or travel doctor
Mhm.
company. Pretty much they contract with doctors who want to work in different areas of the
Mhm.
country or territories. And pretty much they you negotiate your pay rate with them because they're the middleman. Of course, they have to get a cut of it as well of whatever you're
Mhm.
making. So they will find the facility for you, the hospital, the clinic for you,
Mhm.
present all of your information to this clinic so they can decide yay or nay if they want you to be on, they want you to bring you on board, and then they go through the credentialing process. So they submit all the documents for you.
Mm.
You in this process, you have agreed with this locum tenens company, or in my case, it was Global Medical, what the
Mhm.
pay rate reimbursement would be. And so
Mhm.
sometimes they'll say, okay, you're going to make this much per hour. This is the hours they want you to work. This is what they're going to cover. Usually your travel, housing, rental car, malpractice insurance. For in return, we will pay you this much per hour.
Mhm.
And so they've already worked out all the numbers. And
Mhm.
again, in that particular assignment, it wasn't that it was great pay. It wasn't
Mhm.
great pay because
Do
other
you think
recruiters.
that the pay I can assume probably the pay was it similar, but do
Mhm.
you think that the, housing and, the per diem, did that compensate, or do you think it still was kinda low?
No, it was low. It
Okay.
was low.
Alright, good.
It was
Alright.
low to the
Okay.
point where when I would speak with other recruiters from other companies who,
Uh-huh.
wanted me to kinda, "Okay, well, hey, come back here and do,"
Yeah.
"Why are you going there?
Yeah.
Why are you working for that?" And
Mhm.
again, at the time, it was because I knew it was low,
Mhm.
but my soul needed it.
Yeah.
That's all I can
Yeah,
explain
no,
it.
I totally understand. You needed it. You needed
Yeah.
the break, you need the breath of fresh air, and also just the kind of the awakening of seeing like, okay, this is kind of the environment that I'm looking for, and this type of environment actually exists. Like this is really
Yes.
possible. And just that alone is kind of like just sitting in that and like kind of rebooting. I call it release and resetting, and
Mhm.
just kind of kind of deciding where you want to go from there. When you decided to start taking on travel medicine, like what was your home dynamic? Like, do you have children, if you don't mind sharing, a partner? How was
Yeah.
your family supportive in this process?
Yeah. So in the beginning, right,
Uh-huh.
when I was opening the practice, at that time I was married. We
Mhm.
did not have children, but it was me and my husband. And he was totally fine with me traveling. He had no issue whatsoever.
Mhm.
He wasn't a clingy man.
Mhm.
Um, so he had no problem. When after I kind of transitioned out of private practice and returned to travel more, more or less full time,
Mhm.
um, we were divorced by then, so
Mhm.
and it wasn't because of the travel, of course, right? Because,
Right.
and so we had already separated and went our different ways, but I
Mhm.
had, still no children, but I, have animals, pets, of
Mhm.
course, dogs at home, and so what I do is when I leave, I, have someone that I board my pets with,
Mhm.
in their home. I just drop them off, and then when I return, I pick them up.
Yeah, and
Uh
I'm glad that you didn't say, like, it wasn't because of the travel, because I think whatever the dynamic is with your family, you make it work, right? If this is
Mhm.
the lifestyle that you wanna pursue, you figure out how does it work with the dynamic, and it's something that you can move on. But I
Yes.
do find and I'm a traveler as well, I'm actually a full-time nomad, so and my partner is a hospitality consultant, so she works for a living, and I actually travel with her because we both have a lifestyle that has that flexibility, and that was something that I desired even prior to meeting her. So this is something that if you aspire to do that you can evolve into and that can
Yes.
work. Because I know a lot of things are going to come to mind when we talk about travel and freedom is like, well, I have this at home, I have this and that. But if it's something that you do truly aspire to do, there are ways to making it happen. So I want to kind of put that dynamic in there.
Yes, and I'll just add to that. So, and even if you I have plenty of colleagues who have children,
Mhm.
husbands, multiple children. I can think
Mhm.
of one now who has 4 kids and a husband, um, and they both travel.
Mhm.
And how do they make that work? Well, they use, an au pair service or which is pretty much where you bring someone into your home, you provide them room and board,
Mhm.
and they pretty much function as like a babysitter or a nanny. They work so
Mhm.
many hours per week, they take the kids to school, whatever you need them to do. And, she and her husband, they just kind of alternate their schedule. So one of them is always home, right?
Mhm.
But they alternate it. So you can still do it if you have children, if you have pets. There are all kinds of meal services. Like, people say, well, what about food and this? Well, there are all kinds of things that, services that you can order for that. Even if you have a pet, if I didn't want to board my pet, I could actually, I've used for other reasons for more longer term, like, let's say longer term, but extended personal travel. I've
Mhm.
used house sitters before where literally I just bring
Mhm.
someone into
Yeah,
my
there's a house
home.
sitter app. Mhm. Yep.
Yes, I just bring them into you provide them again, room and board,
Mhm.
and they pretty much just stay at the house with your pets and take care of them while you're away. So,
And speaking of house, why did you decide to keep your house? If you do it is this part-time? Like, talk about that because that's always a discussion too.
yeah. So for now, when I transition out, right, to go back
Mhm.
to the road, I probably could have sold my home. I probably
Mhm.
could have, but it was already a base. And for me, I just did the math. The prices
Mhm.
for housing were going up. I knew at this point this was still going to be my base in the US for now,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Um, So just doing the math again, like, okay, well, if you sell, I would literally have to leave this area completely, which I love the area that I live in.
Mhm.
I would have to leave the area, probably the state, and then
Mhm.
make my way, somewhere else. So it was the math of it. So it was actually cheaper to keep the home
Yeah,
because I
makes
had purchased
sense.
it many years prior. So it was cheaper for me to keep the home, um, as a base. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. And this is just to demonstrate that, whatever you decide to pursue, everything is customizable. Like there is no
Yes.
whereas you're coming off a path that is very structured and this is how it goes and you're kind of trapped into like this particular structure or system. If you choose to kind of evolve and choose another path that you do feel called to, everything is customizable. And one of the things that comes up in my sessions with clients, especially when you're coming from a very high performing structured environment, is sometimes, that does make them feel insecure, or, you just unstable. And that's not something that you're used to. And it was interesting. I had this conversation the other day with a client and she's a psychiatrist. And so what we talked about is, you can evolve on this journey. And what the only thing you need to do is kind of figure out what that structure and that route is for you. So I described it of as like thinking of your life like a tree. You know, the tree is rooted. So that's the only opportunity for them to grow. So figure out what is the best way for you to feel rooted. Not everybody needs a home base in order to feel rooted. Not everybody needs a structured salary in order for them to feel rooted. Sometimes their mission is a way for them to feel rooted in whatever you're doing that feels a little bit kind of like free and kind of flowy. There's always part of a dynamic that does require you to be structured and rooted in some way. So figure out and define what that is for you, no matter what the project is. And then as you evolve, think of a tree. You have the roots, the structure, like so the pillars that help and support that journey and that evolution. But then you have the leaves that gives you that creativity to change and evolve through each season. So kind of think of your life like that. It doesn't have to be a structured way and you can evolve, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're just out here winging it and you have no structure to your life and that's the only way that you can find freedom. You can find a balance and continue to evolve and express your creativity at the same time. And I find with high performers that are used to that structure, we do need to take the time to figure out what that looks like for you. I hope that kind of makes sense, but it's like we had a really dynamic
Beautifully
conversation.
stated.
Yeah. Okay.
Beautifully stated. That's why I'm
Yeah.
smiling. Beautifully stated. And if more physicians, 'cause I'm just speaking for
Yeah. Yeah. For
professionals,
sure.
but I'm speaking just from my personal. If more of us could embrace that and be okay with that, the world would open
Mm,
for us. The world would
absolutely.
open. Yeah.
I love that. Beautiful. So you're currently in the US Virgin Islands. You got this fresh breath of air. So talk to
Mhm.
us about, your journey through that and then ultimately how you decided to start helping physicians do the same thing.
Yeah. So, I'm in the Virgin Islands. Again, life is very peaceful there. A lot of time to think. A lot of great ideas would just flow to me there. Um, and again, remember, I said the pay wasn't that well, so but I still like being there.
Right.
So what I decided was, okay, well, let me see if I can. No, I just decided let me take some other assignments in between. So what I would do is I would be in the Virgin Islands maybe for a week or two, and then I would come back to my home base, and then I
Mhm.
would maybe be home for a week or two, and then I would go to California and work an assignment there because the pay is a lot different, right? So it's a
Mhm.
huge difference of pay. I would go there to work
Mhm.
for like a week, whatever they needed,
Mhm.
So between those two places, I was able to keep myself open to fresh ideas,
Mhm.
support myself with the salary, right? Still provide my rooted home base when I needed it. Although the Virgin Islands was starting to become a rooted home base for me as well.
Mhm.
Um, and what I found is that in all the places that I would be throughout California, sometimes I would be in like a training program, a residency program, filling in for that attending physician on my assignment, right? Um, all of the younger doctors would always ask me, like, we're like, where are you from? So you don't live here?" I'm like, "No, I don't live here." And they would be puzzled, really
Mhm,
puzzled. "Well, how did you get here?" And so I would explain to them what I'm doing. So they were clueless. Even some of the young doctors who were not in training but had been practicing for like, 2 or 3 years,
mhm,
they never heard of this. And I remember one young physician telling me, she's like, "They don't talk to us about that in medical school." I'm like, "No,
mhm,
because they want to steer you to, as you said before earlier in our conversation, these big conglomerates. They want to steer you there, get you locked in there, so
mhm,
you can't think of anything outside of that."
mhm,
So I noticed that. And then I would explain to them what I'm doing, how I did it, what they need to do. And I remember listening to a podcast by a young lady who was living abroad, and she was basically saying, like, if you kind of want to start, just entrepreneurial ideas, right? I'm
mhm,
always drawn to that. And her thing was like, if you're thinking about starting a business, what think about what's the thing that people are always asking you about.
mhm,
So when you're out and about, if it's your makeup, if it's your
mhm,
hair, if you're doing that yourself, right?
mhm,
Okay, something's there. What are they always asking you about? So on all my assignments, I was always being asked, how do you do what you do? Like,
mhm,
how do you do that? Oh, I never heard of that. So I decided, okay, well, this could be a business for me.
mhm.
I knew there were lots of podcasts out there talking about travel medicines. Of course, the companies that provide the
Right.
contracts, they have their different websites, but no one would tell you exactly what to do and how to do it, like
Mhm,
step by step. Like no one said, okay, A, do this, B,
mhm,
do this. They would just talk about, like we're having this conversation,
mhm,
right? So someone could be inspired listening to me and want to do this.
mhm.
And they're probably just like, okay, that sounds well, but how did you do this? I've never, thought about this before.
Mhm.
Well,
And
I just,
why I'm sorry, I know you're probably gonna go into it,
no,
but
no, no.
what, since we're talking about that, I know that you do have a step-by-step guide and a course to really that goes in depth, right? But I'm wondering, just like you're mentioning here, if you can kinda give our listeners, and especially physicians who are thinking about this, what is like the high level step-by-step process so they have that visual, process to consider?
Yeah. So what they have to do, number one, decide if this is something that they're contemplating, right? And if it is, you don't have to leave. Well, I guess it depends on what the structure of your current job is,
Mhm,
but you have to you can, if your current job allows you some flexibility where you can have like a 10 days or so here, you can actually take a test assignment, so you can kind of credential with the company, let them know that you're still working full time, that you just want to test out the water. Sometimes it doesn't even have to be a full week. There are some places that need weekend coverage. It could even be in your local area. So you have to start the credentialing process, which can, you have to submit all of your documents, your licenses, your medical degree, residency completion. You have to have references, etc., from from peers.
mhm,
Um, so number one, you would have to do that. So you would decide if this is something that you want to do. See if you can, in your schedule, if you can kind of have some time to test it out, or if you know you want to do it, you can literally start contacting a locum tenens company to start the process. Right?
mhm,
The process is them vetting you in terms of like your malpractice claims, um, your licenses, to make sure
mhm,
you're board certified, etc. That's a little bit of a process, but if you have all your documents together, it makes it easier. So they
mhm,
would do that, and in all of that, as the company is vetting you, then you would literally be filling out opportunities. So they would kind of present things, jobs to you. Okay, this
mhm,
facility needs someone these many days per week or these many days per month. And then they would tell you what the pay is. And then you would do your research and say yay or nay, right?
mhm,
And then
mhm,
once you sign on to that, say that you chose hospital A to take that assignment, or clinic A to take that assignment, then there's usually going to be a credentialing process for that clinic. But because you're working with this company already, they have most of your documents, so they will submit that on your behalf, and there may be a few more things that you have to submit.
Mhm.
Once that's done, and usually they'll expedite it because of the nature of things. Um, Once that's done, then they basically tell you, okay, this is the day you're going to fly out. We purchase your plane ticket. You're going to get a rental car. This is going to be your hotel. And then this is what day you need to show up for orientation.
Mhm.
So pack your bags, you leave, you go, you show up, give you a little bit of orientation. You usually meet like, a medical director there, someone to just kind of give you an overall view of things, a little bit of EMR training, and then the next day you show up, here's your list, and you start. So, but most physicians, we are trained where we know we're independent. We know what to
Yeah.
do, right?
Right, right, right.
So the only thing will be new is like the environment that you're in. And what I always tell people when they question me about, oh, but it's a different hospital all the time. Sometimes if you do a good enough job,
Mhm.
they're gonna want you to come back for
Yeah.
more work.
Mhm.
So, like, I've been on assignments, recurring assignments at the same facility for a year and a half before.
Mhm.
Um, and what I do when I first get there, they show you the main areas, and I just ask questions. I ask
Mhm.
everybody, okay, no, I'm going to ER. Am I going the right way, or how do I go? And someone's always going to be willing, to
Yeah.
show you, and you learn one way, and boom, by day
Go.
two, the hospital. So, so overall, that's kind of like that's the process, right? But in between all of that is like knowing, is this a good pay rate? Like, are they, trying to stiff me? Are they
Mhm.
underpaying me? Are they asking me to do a little bit too much for this assignment that
Mm.
perhaps they wouldn't for someone else? And so those are the questions that I answer. So not only going through this whole process of, what it takes and what it does. And of course, once you do it, it becomes easier and easier and easier to do it each time.
Right.
Um, but I also dive into what is an acceptable salary? How do you negotiate your salary? If you're coming from this big group that you've worked with, right? So there
Mhm.
was never any payroll. They always paid your taxes for you. I discuss like how you set up your own physician business entity for
Mhm.
those that have not, how you pay yourself, how you get your own
Mhm.
insurances, your own personal insurance or your family insurance, how you set up your own retirement accounts, etc.
Mhm. Yeah,
So
because, essentially, because one of my other questions was, okay, so what would be the difference between, just signing up with a locums company and then getting placed versus actually working with someone who's doing it to really kind of get that advice. And so essentially you're positioning yourself as an advisor. And so if a physician is interested in this type of opportunity, essentially you're running a business, right? And
yes,
so you're teaching them how to really properly set themselves up, everything that's entailed. You're advocating on their behalf. They know exactly what to ask for, how to negotiate appropriately. And then there's also the component of the actual transition itself. Anything that comes up mentally, location wise, anything that they should be considering. How do they set up their home to make sure, everything is in place? Any, of those questions you're not going to get from just the placement company. You really are going to have an advocate by yourself to really kind of guide you through the process, and not just any advocate, an actual physician who has been in your
yes,
position and is actually doing the assignments as well. So that's what I
yes,
always say is like, look for someone who has done what you are trying to do,
yes.
um,
Great
and can
advice.
yeah, and create that dynamic to bring in a partner, that can really, set you up for success. So I think that that's absolutely fantastic. And so, one of the things that I know for sure when it comes to travel is that travel can also burn you out, right? So what are some of the things that you do for yourself and you suggest for others when it does come to an overextended schedule in regards to travel and work?
Yeah. So definitely don't overschedule yourself for sure.
Mhm.
Because here's the thing, the more you work, the more the company, the local tenants company, the
Mhm.
more they get paid, right? So
Mhm.
they will schedule you as much as possible,
Yeah.
like if they can, they'll schedule you for every day out of the month, right?
Yeah.
If it's
Yeah.
available, they
Right.
will. So the key is not to overschedule yourself for sure. So what I tend to do is, like for instance, like traditional hospitalist work, in this country right now is, working perhaps 1 week on, like you work 7 days and then you have a week off. You work 7 days, you have a week off. So in travel medicine, though, you can have a little bit more of a variety. So you could say work 7 days and then have the remaining 3 weeks off. Or
Mhm.
you could say, I want to work 10 days out of this month. You can choose how you want to work based on the income that you want for yourself.
Mhm. Yeah.
So again, just don't overschedule. And then when traveling, you wanna get a decent place, so most people know what a decent hotel is and what a
Mhm.
decent hotel is not. Um, of course,
Mhm.
avoiding fast food. Again, the
Mhm.
beauty of it is with all these different digital amenities that we have these days, you can, order food prep directly to your hotel room or
Mhm.
wherever you are, or you could make it or request that you want a hotel that has, like, a small kitchen so that you
Mhm.
can prepare your own meals if you like. So it's a different there are lots of things that you can do, but the key is, not to overschedule yourself, and I've seen some young physicians literally travel the same day. Like, they travel from their home, they arrive in
Mhm.
their location, say they're working nights, and they'll start night shifts that same night. I don't
Mhm.
recommend that because that's,
Mhm.
like for me, that's too much.
Yeah.
I always travel the day prior, get settled in, and then start work the next day.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
you have some rest in between because travel is can be very, tiring. So, I mean, that's really the main thing is
Yeah,
just
it's
not
just
overscheduling.
don't overschedule and have those boundaries set in place, and it's
Mhm.
not the same dynamic as you have for, like, working for a hospital or a group.
Mm-mm.
You are running the business, essentially, even though that the company is placing you, you're not obligated or, set up to the same, expectations as you would, working an employee job. So, you do have more of the freedom and the autonomy to really set up the schedule that fits you best and set up the boundaries and also the requirements in order for you to be successful on that specific assignment. So it's not the same as the dynamic. They're essentially, like you said, they're being compensated to place you. So they want to make sure that you are happy so that you
Yes.
can thrive and continue to work on those specific assignments. And like you mentioned, if you're doing well, you're going to be called back not only by the hospital or whatever wherever you're working, but the organization, but also by the, placement company as well. Can they
Yes.
work for multiple, locums companies at the same time? Um
Yes.
mhm,
Yes, and I recommend that. I always recommend that a physician gets credentialed with at least 2 locums companies and maybe
mhm,
a third one. It's always good. No, you don't have to always be on an assignment for either one of those company at any given time. You don't.
mhm,
But it just offers you more options because some companies may go with locums company A versus B, so it gives
mhm.
you more variety to choose from, number 1. And it also just gives you, to choose from in terms of locations of assignments, the type of assignments, the pay
Mhm.
rate, etcetera, because they vary.
Are most of the assignments in the US or are they international as well?
Yeah, so most of them are in the US, but there are international assignments. So
Mhm,
again, the caveat for international assignments is the pay is going to be a little bit different, right? So
mhm,
depending on what country that you're in, like
mhm,
for instance, like you could perhaps go to Ireland, right? They do
mhm.
accept some US graduates. You could go there for an assignment, but the salary may not be the
Right,
same, but it's kind of like whatever, you're looking for. Or you could go to Australia, New Zealand, etc.
right.
Um,
You can go for
but
the experience, but the pay is probably not gonna be the same.
yeah,
But
so
I
you
like
just have to keep that in mind.
yeah,
Yeah.
the options are fantastic though. I think
Yeah.
that's beautiful. Um, I had something in mind. I forgot to, but maybe I'll come back to it.
Hmm.
Okay. So one of the things that did stand out to me is the fact that you said you can do test assignments. So it doesn't mean that you have to walk away from what you're doing today in order to make this work. This is something that you can really like stick your toe in and see if it's something that's beneficial to you, which is absolutely amazing. And I know that we talked about you having your step by step guide and also your course. And we talked a little bit high level here, but kind of talk about what are the opportunities and the things that you work on physicians that are transitioning and how you can help them, offline.
Yeah. So what I do is, and actually I've been working for the last 2 months, actually, 2 to 3
Mhm.
months. Just again, we all evolve, right? So my course that I had teaching this was initially, well, it's still online.
Mhm.
It's available online on a platform online, but um, just again being in different communities with different entrepreneurs, etc. I decided to transition it from an online platform to an app platform. So it's
Ooh.
more, it's in your face, right? So
Yeah,
everything
right.
that's there, yeah, you can be on your break at work and just say, okay, you know what, let me review this. So everything is there in the app when
I
I
love
release it later this month. Yeah.
I love it. So they get access to like the guides and the course so they know exactly step by step what to do. Do they have personal access to you? Any,
Yes.
one-on-one connection? Okay. How
Yes.
does
So
that
as
work?
and part of this, when I fully transition over to the app, is there will be a community. So in this app, you can ask any questions that you want. We will have weekly or biweekly group meetings where I post a time. This is going to be the
Mhm.
time for the group meeting. Anyone who wants to join can join and ask questions. If you can't
Mm,
join, whoever is there will post, the recording of the meeting in the app, just so
mhm.
you can see whatever questions come up. But yes, they will have direct access to ask me any questions that they may have, to get any feedback from me regarding anything that comes up along the way. Again, I'm not an attorney. I will be advising from an advisor standpoint. Like,
Mhm.
that seems a little low,
Yeah.
Mm, go back and ask for
Yeah, for sure.
XYZ. Again, until you are abreast enough to do it on your own. Because once you
Mhm.
do like 3 or 4 assignments, you really have an idea of what the process works like and what you should be expecting, as long as you're staying in community with other physicians.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think that's such an important critical component to this,
Yeah.
especially like in entrepreneurship in general, is can be an extremely lonely process. So to have a community of other physicians that are doing what you aspire to do and have that, that interaction and engagement is really, really important, especially just through this entire journey. Like a lot of entrepreneurs are missing the social component, especially coming off of 2020. So that
Hmm.
social component is so important, and the fact that you have that, is going to be critical, and then that you most programs, when they do have, like, a digital course or a guide, it's extremely difficult to kind of connect with the actual advisor.
Hmm.
So, that access to you, is, extremely valuable as well, right? Because most of the time, you're just purchasing a course and you have no community, no one to ask
Hmm.
questions to, and so that personal component is extremely valuable as well. So I love to hear it. So thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. So in the beginning of the conversation, you mentioned it. You said you had a vision that for the care that you wanted to provide patients and for the care that they actually deserve. So now you're in another season of your life. What is your vision moving forward?
Well, my vision is still that to provide patients with the care that they deserve,
Hmm.
and I do that. And I'll tell you how. I don't take assignments from. We know that there's certain companies out there, locums companies, where there's like that grind that I talked to you about. Like they want you to
Hmm.
see, 20 patients, 25 patients, etc. I know who they are and I avoid them because I don't
Hmm.
want that experience.
Hmm.
I tend to go with assignments that, and again, these may not be in the most popular locations, right? So they're going
Hmm.
to be in areas that are not as popular, maybe smaller areas. So maybe you're not going to be in, say, San Francisco, but you may be a little bit outside of San Francisco.
Hmm.
So I take assignments where it's a reasonable workload. Of course, the pay is there. Um, and I can provide that level of service to the patients. I take
Hmm.
those assignments. That's what I look for. Someone else may just be looking for the money. They may say, "Okay,
Hmm.
I'll see 20 patients a day if you pay me XYZ."
Right.
So that I still have. And the vision for the patients, I still have that. But I also realize in all of this, as we're trying to figure out, as you mentioned your other client, like trying to figure out how can we stay rooted? How do we stay grounded? What starts to evolve is there's a bigger mission for you in all of this. So, yeah, I am introducing younger physicians or even seasoned physicians to something that they may have not thought about before. But also, I think just providing what a lot of caretakers, care providers, what we need is we need a way to reconnect to patients and to kind of just take back our autonomy because most physicians that you speak with, that I speak with, most of them are angry, not at patients, they're
Mhm.
angry at the process that we have to work in, the system that we have to work in. So, and I had this conversation with someone else, she's like, "It's not just physicians, it's nurses too." But
Mhm.
everyone's, is kinda angry, so then I was like, "You know what? But if you can embrace this," as you told your other client, "if you can embrace that it may not be this nice structured Mrs. ABCD at 9, 9:30, 10,
Mhm.
10:30, Monday through Friday, every weekend off. It may not be that. It may not look like that, but it
Mhm.
looks like Miss ABCDE, um, at Hospital X in this state, providing the service that you want during this time, and then you can still come back to whatever is rooted for you. So instead of having this vision of having like this multi-chain, primary care, urgent care, clinic or business, I said, no, maybe this is what I need to do now is just kind of introduce this concept to more physicians so we can all as a collective just come together and just kind of
Mhm.
just retake what we trained for. Like what we're
Yeah.
doing now, we're just like this is not what how it's supposed to be. This is not
Right.
how it's supposed to be. At least, my Gen X generation, the generation behind me, they're already kind of like steering them towards don't even think about it because
Yeah.
it's not an option, but it's
Right.
there's always an option. I hope that you could follow that because I think it was kind of sounding a,
No,
a, a little
I'm
crazy,
following
but
you.
mhm,
Yeah, I see. Your mission expands just beyond, helping physicians specifically get into travel medicine. It's just really opening the eyes to opportunity out there and really kind of understanding that physicians are truly the face of healthcare, right?
mhm,
And given, an opportunity to really touch other physician lives as a physician and get them to see that there is opportunity beyond this type of system and giving them an opportunity to kind of revisit what their career means or their future means for them is more of kind of in touch with how you see this mission evolving. You're helping them from a practical sense, but there's also this internal, vibe of like really helping other physicians take back healthcare, and that's how it was supposed to be, right? And there's so many physicians and other healthcare professionals that I come from pharma, and had this awakening in 2018 or so. And so we all are just going to do our part. I saw that there was an underserved community outside of the pharmaceutical industry, and I'm not anti, but holistic medicine even is just so underserved. And physicians typically don't come out with the business acumen or the sales and the
uh-huh,
marketing, and they're being educated by organizations essentially
yes,
in disguise as people. But anyway, and I'm like, I want to work with physicians in a different type of way. Like I see the potential, but essentially what made me focus in on physicians is the fact that you guys are the face of healthcare. Everybody's trying to get to you, but who is amplifying the voice for you specifically? So I can see how, when you are trying to just do your part, but then ultimately in return, it becomes part of this bigger mission to
yeah,
really take back healthcare in the way that it was originally supposed to be. So totally understand.
absolutely. Absolutely. And one other thing too, and this is what I learned, like you said, what was one of my big lessons out of all this process of starting this practice, having to let this practice go and evolve into something else, what I learned is that in the beginning, in that whole process, even though I loved what I was doing, I was so busy.
Mm,
And when you're so busy, you can't even hear or see or be open to a lot of the visions, that or a lot of the things that you probably wanna do, but you just kinda bury them, you just kinda
mm,
bury them to the side. But what starts to happen is when you allow yourself to have a little bit more time, so maybe you're only working 2 weeks out of the month, I'm saying not only, but
mhm,
maybe you find yourself now with a whole week to just do what you wanna do.
mhm,
Nobody's schedule. What do you do during that time? Like, someone's like, "What am I gonna do?"
mhm,
Like, you can read, you do what you've always wanted to do, and then when you start doing that, your mind is a little bit more at ease, and then things come to you. And sometimes there are things that have been so buried, or there are processes that we've been so trained, or they're so entrenched in us that we begin to question them.
mhm.
In the beginning, we were too busy to question them. Like, you
Correct.
had your awakening to say, okay, you're disguised as someone here who's offering a service, but no, I know what you really are. I see what
Mhm,
you really are.
mhm,
Then you start to question that. But the current model now is to keep you so busy that you don't have time to think. I propose that you don't be as busy. You can still earn just as much money, if not more. Have your time to think and use that time to build whatever you want to build. Whether that's a new clinic, a new hospital, whether it's a new business, or whether it's just starting another community organization or a patient support group, whatever that may be.
mhm.
But use it for that.
Dr. Zonda, you hit it right on the head. It's this trend that I've seen just having these conversations is, you know, it's the quiet time that you get, unfortunately, after you leave your profession or your role that actually brings the answers and the clarity that you're looking for. You're right. The new model is to keep you so busy that you don't have time to think about it.
Uh-huh.
And if you're currently still in your profession and you find the space to hear this conversation, make it your point to find that time for you without it having to be you being laid off or let go or, through a transition. If you're able to do that while you're working, take that time for yourself. I'm guarantee that you're going to find the answers and the clarity that you're looking for. You're right. It only happens in the
Mhm.
quiet time.
Yeah.
Most of the physicians and other healthcare visionaries that I've interviewed and even through my own process, most of the answers that you're looking for while you're in that space come after we've already left and we had the time to actually think through the process. That's what happened to you in the Virgin Islands. Even though you were
Mhm.
already kind of taking on side assignments, like really trying to figure out what you're going to do next, you had to go through the entire process of letting your practice, and maybe that is the process for you. So that's fine, but you had to let go of your former life and step into a new one in order to even find the time to process exactly what you're going to do next. A lot of people will not step into their new life because they're trying to figure out what they're going to do next while they're still in their old one. And so
Yeah.
unless you're creating that time intentionally, it's never going to happen until you leave. So you have to understand that coming from people who've left that matrix system. And if you have the opportunity to really do that for yourself before you leave, that is simply a gift. But
Yes.
regardless, it's going to come to you, right? It's gonna happen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And all we can do, myself and you, in your business, in your platform, is just to have these conversations and hope that they reach someone. And what I would say to add on to that, Bianca, is that it matters not where you are. You can be, planning, say, okay, I have two more years of this and then I'm out. I'm retiring or whatever,
Mhm,
It can be wherever you are in your career, whatever stage. You just got to be able to, or be willing to think outside the box.
mhm, mhm. That's so beautiful. Before we
Hmm.
dived into this closing conversation, I did want to ask you about telemedicine.
Hmm.
Is that part of the structure for locums at all? Is there opportunity in there? Because I know I get asked about telemedicine a lot as well.
So in terms of locums, I'm not familiar with telemedicine in terms of locums because
Okay.
most of the platforms, you can just go to them and credential on your own,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
Um, I'm not familiar with locums and telemedicine itself.
Okay.
Now, if you take an assignment, just say maybe if you take a locums assignment and it's in primary care, say it's an office that you're covering, perhaps for vacation, and they may offer telemedicine to some of their clients. So you would do it in that capacity, right? Because you're filling in for the physician that's not there. But I don't have any direct knowledge myself right now of just say telemedicine itself.
Mhm.
Um, for locum tenens.
Mhm, mhm. Okay, no, no, it
I
makes
don't
sense.
know. Mhm.
I know I get asked that a lot, so but essentially with this type of opportunity, it's traveling to those physical locations, doing those hours, still connecting and having that patient care.
Mhm.
One more question, I keep coming up with questions, but,
Yes.
I had a physician ask me about, so essentially, she was concerned about losing, like, a special type of, experience. She's an OBGYN. So there's this, like, when it comes to certain specialties and where they're working gives you like that experience, that they need in order to continue working in the specific specialty. What if they're worried about losing that credential or that that specialty and going into locums? Is there different type of opportunities that you would be better to answer this question than I would? Because I think that's part of some of the concern as well is like, am I going to lose some type of tier or experience or credential just doing kind of
Mhm.
general work?
Well, here's the thing. So as a specialist, or if as an OB or surgeon, you know how many procedures per year you have to document, how many cases you have to have. Even for me, an
Mhm,
inpatient, I have to show that, okay, I've, treated so many patients per year in a hospital. So you already know what those minimum requirements are. And
mhm,
then what you do is when you're taking on these assignments that you're taking on, you just let the recruiter or who you're working with or the facility know that, like for instance, if you're say OBGYN, obstetrician gynecologist, and maybe they just want you for obstetrics for,
mhm,
6 months out of the time. Out of the year, well, then what you would do is, for those GYN procedures that you want to do is like your next assignment, you could clarify that that you need some GYN procedures.
mhm,
Or usually if you just bring that option up, whoever
mhm,
you're working with, or like this particular obstetrician, whatever it is that she's worried about losing skill set, she should just bring that up in the conversation. And so
mhm,
usually most places, if they have the ability to, like they may
mhm,
not have robotic surgery, but if they have the ability to offer you GYN procedures as well as, say C-sections as well as hysterectomies, um, you know, I'm sure they'll work it out to say, okay, on this day per week, you can do XYZ.
yeah, makes sense.
Yeah,
That's why it's
it's
so
doable.
valuable to have an advisor, in the process because some of
Yes.
those questions, may come up. And so a lot of times if we know it's time for a change and we're like, "This sounds fantastic. I would love to be a travel physician. Like, this is something I've been already contemplating. This is coming up into my experience." The first thing you tend to do is kind of think about all of the resistance, like, "Oh, what about
Mhm.
this? What about that?" So having an advisor in this particular journey is so critical. So Dr. Zunda will be able to really walk with you through this process, not only give you the tactical plan, but also give you the support and the community that you need through the actual transition. So I'm so happy that you were able to come on and share not only your personal journey, but how you are helping others do the same. So I would like to congratulate you as well as taking
Thank
the
you.
step from career into calling and then calling again and then allowing yourself to completely evolve because I know it's not an easy process, but you gave yourself permission to do so. So I want to go ahead and acknowledge you for that today. Tell everybody where they can find you.
Yes. So my website is www.solmdtravel.com. So it's SOLMDTRAVEL.com. And of course, I'm on LinkedIn you can find me under Soul MD Travel or under Xunda Gibson MD. And on the other socials, such as YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, I am there under Soul ND Travel Doctor. So SOLND Travel Doctor. That's my handle for those. So I'm always posting content, just trying to get the word out there, and I think I'll be a lot more um, successful with this app version. And
Mhm.
also, if you go to the website, there's a wait list that you can join if you're interested in the app. But when it's finally released, hopefully later this month, beginning of September, of course, I'll do a blast about that as well. I think it's going to be really, really helpful for a lot of people, or at least get the conversation going.
Yeah, it's the first step is really kind of, I always what you're gonna start doing your research, so this is the good first step to kind of really start exploring that
Hmm.
without, really kind of taking that next approach. So, thank you so much, Dr. Zunda, for sharing
Yes.
your story with us here at Recalibrated Vision. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen in. My name is Bianca Ariel. I'm the founder here at Recalibrated Vision, and you're listening to the Recalibrated Vision podcast, where we are releasing, resetting, and recreating our own lives. Thank you so much. I will see you next time. Please remember to always and forever stay free. Bye.